Alright, hello, this is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and what I've decided to do for the first time in a while is to do some external taping. And what I'm going to do is to try to introduce you to a few things. I'm going to start by going over this PowerPoint presentation with about 35, 37, something like that, slides from SlideShare on beginning Git. If you don't know what Git is, we'll talk about it. And I'm going to traverse my way through most of these URLs that you see here. That'll be the first presentation. Then we'll go into it in earnest, so to speak. So, for the first one here, what I'd like to show you is this presentation right here again from a company called SlideShare, which puts a lot of different things online. Some really, really nice presentations. This one, as you can see, it's called Git 101. Git and GitHub, rather, for beginners. So let's see if I can peruse my way through this. I'm not going to sit and read every slide to you. All right, you can see what the overview is. This is meant to be a very brief little introduction into what Git is. All right, so in order to be able to use Git, you have to install it. After you install it, you have to go out and create a GitHub account. All right, so we'll go through the process of all of those in a bit. Here are some of the places that you can go to get the install. So what I'm going to do is, I believe I've already got it on the system, but I'm going to go out here anyway. So let's just break out of this for just a moment. And I'm going to go out just so you can see what it looks like. Like I said, I should have it already on my system. But I'm going to go out to http://git-scm.com/download. In fact, let's just go to the Git for Windows it would be right here, but let's not even do that. Let's just go to here. All right, so this is git-scm.com. So this is the Git page. As you can see, Git is a free and open source distributed version control system. So the idea behind Git is that you are able to work on a project, save it whenever you feel like it, and whenever you save it, what you're basically doing is you're saving what's referred to as a version of the project. Then if you go on and decide you've made mistakes, you can back up and bring up the previous version. You can share versions, so there's a lot of different stuff that you can do with this. All right, so we're going to look in just a minute. This is an online, kind of the Git Bible, so to speak, but it's a typical Windows download. In other words, in fact, let's see. If I go into Control Panel and I go out to Programs and Features, I'm going to see if I've got Git on here right now. There it is, Git version 1.2.2. It's 425 megs, so it's not small. But you know what? I'm going to uninstall it. So for lack of better words, I'm kind of starting just like you would. You can see it's not here anymore. All right? So I'm going to get the latest source release download for Windows. So I'm going to click there. You can see that it's downloading it, and I'm going to say open when done. And there it is. Okay, so run. Do I want to allow it to make changes? Yes. You should read all this stuff, as always. It tells you what it's all about. Next. I'm going to put it under Program Files Git. That sounds good. You're best off keeping all the options. Now, what's important here, you're going to see this later, is Git can run in two different ways. Git bash, which runs from the command line, and Git GUI. All right, so I'm going to click, I want them both, and it says to continue, it says it will create shortcuts. Sure. Now here, it depends on the book you read or the article you read. This says I'm going to allow it to be used only from Git bash. This says I'm going to use it from the Windows command prompt. Well, I'm going to do this. I do know a little bit of Unix, Linux. I used to use it, which says I want to be able to use Windows command prompt, and optionally some Unix tools. You don't have to do that. All right, click next. The OpenSSL library, that's the default. Windows style, yeah, that's fine. It does say when we do this, we could run into a couple problems with CRLF, which is carriage return line feed. It's not a big thing. This is the old, I believe, the default terminal of MSYS2. That's the old name of Git. We'll enable file caching. We'll enable the credit manager. We will not enable its symbolic links, so I'll just click install. Now, I have no idea how long this is going to take. You can see it's starting. Okay? While this is doing what it's doing, let's go back to the slideshow. All right. If you want to go to Mac, it's the same URL. Well, I guess it's done already. I don't need to view the release notes, and I don't want to launch it yet, so I'm just going to click Finish. All right. So you saw how fast that was, even at 425 meg. So this is where you can go to download it. Probably when I do it in the class, I'll probably uninstall it and reinstall it even again. All right. Then you've got to go over to GitHub and create an account. It's a free account. Notice it's free for public repositories. If you don't know what a repository is, that's one of the things we're going to go over. However, if you want to use private repositories, which are only available to you or your group or whatever, then you have to pay. Are there ways around that? We'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so I'm going to go out to github.com. And again, I already have a GitHub account as well. Okay? So, it tells me the email already exists, etc. Sign up. It says sign in or sign up. So, I've already got an account. I'm going to sign in. And it says that I'm there. You notice once you get there, there is a guide online that you can read that talks about what GitHub is all about. GitHub is a platform that basically you use it in concert with Git. GitHub kind of makes sense. We'll go over it in just a little bit. At least some of it. So, Git is version control. As mentioned here, version control allows you, it can be used in two basic ways. If you're working by yourself on a project, all right, version control can be used so that you can save what you're working on in stages whenever you want to, feel like you should, need to do so. And you can always back up and look at things, at different stages then. So that's one way. The other way that you can use it is if you're working with a team of people. You can each work with your own copy. You can do what's basically called check out, all right, a version of your version, for lack of better words, work on it, and then check it back in. All right, we're also going to talk about things like push and pull, so we'll get into all that. I will tell you that I'm 100% self-taught on this. I've watched some videos, and I've tried going through some stuff, and I'm going to go through one of the videos with you. All right, not in 100% detail, believe me. But as it says, it allows for collaborative development or just self-development. Allows you to know who made changes, what changes they made, and when they changed them. Plus, as mentioned, you can always revert back to a previous state if you want to or need to do so. So, what is the Git part? Notice there, users keep their entire code and their history on their local machines. Now, that said, after you do that, when you work on this in concert with GitHub, you can also push what you're working on to a server or pull what's already on a server to your machine. So when you use it yourself and you're not worrying about using GitHub with it, you can make any changes you want. You don't have to have internet access. So notice it's about 12, 13 years old. The guy who created it is Linus Torvald, who is the same person who basically is one of the founders of Linux. It's not the only the only version control system, I should say, out there. Mercurial is probably the best known other ones. I've seen it. I've never used it. Never used Subversion. Never used Perforce. All right. And of course, since they're doing this on Git, they probably would think it's the best. So how does it work? It says that it can be complicated, but there are only a few key concepts. Well, to even further complicate this with you, I'm going to show you two ways to do things. I'm going to run through two very simple examples, one of which I'm going to do entirely from the command line, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to do most of it again, but I'm going to do it from a GUI. Notice in here, as they're going through this, the important terminology will be shown in blue. All right. So what Git does is it literally takes what's called a snapshot of your code. So in other words, it essentially records everything that you tell it to record about your code at a given point in time. You decide when to take the snapshot. You decide what files to include or not include within that snapshot. So as it says, you have the ability then to go back and visit any snapshot. All right, and those snapshots stay around as long as you keep them around. Once you create one of these snapshots, okay, in order to keep it around, you end up doing what's called a commit. All right, and as mentioned in the last bullet there, a project in essence is made up of a series of commits. When you commit, the commit, as mentioned here, contains three pieces of information. The information about how the files changed from your last commit, a reference to the commit that came before it, known as the parent commit, and a hash code name. There's actually more to it than that, because typically when you do the commit like this, you also typically you'll put a comment in there that explains what the commit is about. All right, we'll look at all this stuff again as we go on. What you're doing and what Git is more than anything else, it's referred to as being a code repository. And a repository, as mentioned right here, is a collection of those files, of all the files that you want to put in the repository, and a history of all those files. That history meaning it shows how those files have been built. So as it says, it consists of all of your commits. It's where all of your work that you've done is stored. All right? So it can live on your remote machine only, or just in case something would happen to your remote machine, or you want to put a copy of it out there for others to use, or maybe you to use at a later time, you can go and do what's called push it to a remote server, and that's using GitHub. I just showed you GitHub, but not really in any depth or breadth of coverage at all. If you go out and somebody has put a code repository out on GitHub, all right, and they've made that code repository public, you can go and copy that entire repository if you want to do so. The act of you copying a code repository, be it yours or someone else's, is known as cloning. As it says, another way of using cloning is to allow teams to clone the same project and each have their own copy, work on it, and then basically go and send their changes back into the master, so to speak. The process of downloading commits that don't exist, so the act of grabbing something from a remote repository. So in other words, you typically taking something from GitHub, so you taking and copying from a server to your client or to your local machine is called a pull. Going in the other direction, the act of you taking your changes and copying them to a server, or also known as a remote repository, is called a push. So a push, you're getting stuff from a server. A pull, you're getting stuff from a server. A push, you're sending stuff to a server. When you work on this, you can also do what's called branching. All right, and that's typically done when people are going to be making copies and a bunch of different people are going to be working on the same project. We'll go over that in a little bit of detail later. When you create a project in Git, the main project itself is known as the master branch. All right, so again, we'll look at that in just a bit. So what does a typical project look like? It says it's a bunch of commits linked together that live on some branch contained in some repository. All right. Now, I'm not going to go there, but if I did go right here, there is another tutorial. The author says also a good tutorial. I looked at it, so-so. Now, don't let this particular slide throw you. This is not externally what a project will look like. This is more internally what a project will look like. So like I said, don't let that throw you one way or the other. All right, you'll notice there's a head right there, and that's basically what you're currently working on. Typically it's hooked on, as it says, to the master, but it doesn't have to be. All right, so what is a head? It's a reference to the most recent commit. It's where you committed to last. That's why it says in most cases it'll be a reference to the master, but it doesn't have to be. So what is the master? It's the main branch of your project. By default, it's called master. It doesn't have to be called master, but there's really probably never a reason to change it from the name master. The start of a branch, as it says, points to a specific commit. All right, so it's kind of like, you're going down a flow of code and you're going sequentially, but now, you have an if statement and you're able to go to somebody else's branch if you want to do so, or your own branch. When you want to make any changes to your project, you make a new branch based on a commit. Again, we'll see that in a little bit. Again, these are pictures. That's not really how it looks. After you branched away, if you want to go and take what you've made in your branch and copy it back to the master, that's known as merging or doing a merge. So how do you make a commit? It's really not hard. Okay, you choose the files that you want to commit that typically exist on your own local computer, and you add them onto an index, which is known as staging. All right? So you stage what you want to have changed. So you make some changes to a file or to files. You use the git add command to put the file or files into the staging environment. Then you use git commit to create the commit. And again, if you say, well, that doesn't actually sound hard. It isn't. So this is what's happening internally. Again, I'm not going to go over these internal things with you. All right, so finally, kind of going through what Git is. What's GitHub? That is the server, or it's a web-based repository for Git projects. It's also known as a remote repository. As it says, it allows for code collaboration with anyone online. All right? It's about, 8 or 9 years old? It has an enterprise edition for business. That's the one you pay for. So your GitHub, if you are willing to work with what are called public repositories, they're all free. If you want to use private repositories, so maybe you've got something that's specific to the place you work with, all right, that it's I can't think of a word right now, but it's internal to the company that you work with and you don't want to share it with anyone. Then you'd have to get the enterprise and actually pay for it. All right. I'm going to quickly go through some of these resources in just a couple minutes too. But what I want to do is, that was the idea right there. So in the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of these URLs that are here. But I'm already at, I'm already at 19 minutes. And I think that's a good place to stop, all right, for beginning this. So I'll be back with the next lecture in a couple minutes.